Who are the dream new owners of Manchester United? For some fans, it might be Dubai. For some fans, it might be Jim Ratcliffe. For other fans, it might be Apple, somebody else. All of those fans, you, myself, we all have the same intention in mind. We want what is best for Manchester United, what will take us back to the very, very top. Now, I've covered pretty much everything here on United People's TV so far. We've had conversations and videos on Sir Jim Ratcliffe. We've talked about the idea of Dubai investing in Manchester United in the same way that Saudi invested in Newcastle and Abu Dhabi with City. We've spoken about Apple and the wild rumours that came around about Apple. We've spoken about Saudi Arabia and then backing the idea of private investment to Manchester United. And this week, I will be covering the American side of things as well, because I haven't actually covered that just yet. What I want to do in this video is focus on Gary Neville's comments about the concept of a manifesto. What should these new owners be held accountable to? What should fans be asking? What should fans be expecting? How can we make sure we get what is best for Manchester United after the Glazers? That's what I'm going to run through in this video. Run through all the points that Gary raised and add my own on top of it, because I think it's a really important video that we need to make sure we don't lose focus of amidst all these different names. We need what is best for the football club. So let's run through that together and make sure you drop a like on the video. And I apologise about the sound yesterday. Genuinely, I won't tell you the I was cleaning my microphone and I turned it down a bit. But it should be sweet now, and you can let me know in the comments below. But let's run through Gary Neville's comments here, because I think they're really interesting, and it raises the conversation that we should be having here as a community.
And I think what the Manchester United fans need to see is a manifesto from the new owners. They need acceptance. We can't, I don't think, as a club anymore, and any club, I think, in this position, be handed an owner that basically screams against what the club stands for or what the club wants. So there are manifesto pledges that I think are really important, like a fan voice, like the fan experience, like maybe even positions for fans on the board. But then more practical things. The sporting project needs to improve. What's the sporting project going to be? Are they going to not take dividends? Are they going to make sure it's a debt-free football club and that they're reinvesting? Dividends maybe one day, but for the first 5 years, maybe there's a sort of if you like, a holiday on dividends, that they put everything back into the club. Maybe there's obviously a new stadium that needs to be built, a new training ground. These are pledges that I can think of off the top of my head that are really important, I think, for anybody bidding for Manchester United.
He raises a lot of good points there, and that's what I want to run through here. So I've got these written down here. Now, Gary spoke about the fan experience, which is obviously tied into the new stadium. And I don't know whether I've put these down in lists of priorities. Maybe I have. I didn't mean to, but maybe I have, because for me, the first and the most important thing that we need to make sure from any new owner is that debt is a foreign concept to Manchester United from now on. It is the debt which has hampered Manchester United since the Glazers took over. It is the debt that they leveraged on the club that forced us as a football club to spend our money on servicing their debt rather than investing into our football club and our football team. It's probably the reason why Old Trafford remains dilapidated, because there hasn't been the investment there. And that's because of the debt. So first and foremost, we have to make sure, whether it's USA, Dubai, whoever it is, that that debt is absorbed into the sale price and that debt is gone from the club, that that debt is paid off when the new owners take control of Manchester United. We were debt-free before the Glazers came in. We have to be debt-free when the Glazers leave. That's number one on my list. Number two on my list, I've got pledge of club investment. And I'm going to point towards what we saw here with Chelsea and what we saw with Todd Bowley. Look, Chelsea agreed a $4.25 billion agreement to buy the club. And look, they paid $2.5 billion for the club's shares, which leaves, if my maths is correct, $1.75 billion. That is correct, isn't it? $1.75 billion as a pledge to investment in the club. Now, that's going to be on a wide variety of things. I'm sure that will be down to new player investments, Stamford Bridge redevelopment, new training facilities. And that is where United need to make sure that that is tied into it, because we know full well Old Trafford and the redevelopment of Old Trafford is the biggest, probably the biggest question I think you can ask about these new owners. Because of the scale of investment that's required, we're looking at, if we're talking about a new stadium, Old Trafford, whether that's redevelopment of Old Trafford, whether that's a new stadium altogether. I know you might not, I know you don't like the idea of it, a lot of you, but this has been neglected for so long. I question whether Manchester United are going to be able to develop it to the scale that it needs to be developed to while still remaining and playing inside it. It just seems almost implausible. We'll find out. Carrington, so far behind. That's Carrington there. And we need what City have. If we're talking about investment in a club, that's just something that you cannot argue that City have got. City have done it properly. You can argue about the funds and where the money's coming from and X, Y, Z, but in terms of what they've done for Manchester, what they've done for the project of City and how they've regenerated an area, they've done a lot of good. And it hurts me to say that, but that's what I want Manchester United to be getting from our new owners. And that's why, for me, that pledge of investment is so important. It's number 2 on my list. And then comes number 3, which for a lot of you is going to be number 1. I don't really think number 3 is achievable without number 1 and number 2 being confirmed first, though. And of course, that's getting Manchester United back to the top. We want Manchester United to be winning Premier Leagues again. We want Manchester United to be winning Champions Leagues again. We want to get back to the top table of European and domestic football. And that's what I mean when I write down there saying, what is your sporting project? The sporting project of the Glazers was finish inside the top 4, rinse and repeat. Finish outside the top 4, give more money for investment. Stay inside there, no real ambition to win anything. That can't be the case with our new owners. The new owners have to marry success with making money. And those two things are massive. They're completely intertwined, and that's what the Glazers now have realised. The absolute idiots. But the sporting project is a massively important thing. For me, it's more important that the debt's paid off first and that they pledge to spend X amount in terms of the infrastructure of the football club, but ultimately that's gearing towards the sporting project. You want United to win the Champions League, within 5 years? I'm sure these conversations will be had. I don't think it'll be written down. Gary Neville, of course, with his ties to Labour now, he's getting political. And that's why the concept of a manifesto is a very political thing, but I can understand the logic of it applying to Manchester United. Number 4, we've got written down there, no dividends. These guys leached off the club for so long. Their sporting project was their own back pocket. Their sporting project was to make sure that they had enough money to pay for whatever they wanted to do away from Manchester United. It had nothing to do with the benefit of the football club. And I agree with Gary Neville in the concept there that no dividends should be allowed. Right. If they buy the club and they make us debt-free, they can technically do what they want. But in terms of setting a new tone and stepping away from the previous regime and getting fan support on side, which will be an important part of this, it makes sense to not take any dividends. Because ultimately, if you leave and that kind of ties back into number 2 of the pledge of a club investment. Because if you leave the money inside the club, sure, you might not be able to take a dividend that year. But then if you leave that money inside the club and you spend it, that dividend will be worth X amount more. You would gain interest on that by your overall investment when you sell Manchester United at the end will be even greater because you've left all the money inside the club. That's not the logic that the Glazers had. The Glazers were just rinse and repeat, cash cow, 20 mil, going to United like a cash point every year for 20 mil. That's what the new owners cannot do and should not do. And they need to learn from the mistakes of the Glazers. As I said, in terms of fan support, that's going to be a big step towards it. And I've got it written down there as number 5. And it is important, man. But communication. It's one thing that made the Glazers, created such antithesis towards them. Apart from the fact that they've absolutely abysmal owners anyways. It's the fact that they just lurked in the shadows the whole time. They didn't want to be seen. They didn't want to be heard. Because they knew that they were just pillaging the club. Now, it's much easier to have that sort of communication if you're a good owner, if you're a decent owner, if you're doing what is right by the football club. But communication is an important part. And just as important, maybe not just as important down there, but representation, that's fan representation. You remember this campaign that was started, when was this? After the European Super League collapsed, Must organised it, got Eric Cantona there. And it was the concept of the campaign for Manchester United fan share ownership, which we still are yet to, well, I'm not sure we'll ever see that now. We won't see it under the Glazers. It was a bit of a false promise. But ultimately, if we're looking at the dream, it's 50+1. It's Manchester United fans owning Manchester United. I think realistically, that's that's almost impossible given the size of Manchester United, given how much money it would cost to do it. But there has to be better fan representation. That's kind of tied into communication. But for me, looking at these, it doesn't really matter who I'm talking about. Dubai, Apple, Harrison Blitzer, Amazon, Facebook. You can name any bit. It does not matter if all 6 of these things aren't core parts of that project. What's the point in getting Dubai in, hypothetically, if their sporting project is to just repeat what the Glazers did, even though that's very unlikely when it comes to Dubai. But what about Harrison Blitzer or an American investment if they came in and they were just a Glazers V2? That's not what is best for Manchester United. That's why I wanted to do this video. I will continue to be doing lots more content on new ownership, on the conversations around it. But this, I think, is a really good point that Gary Neville raised. The idea of a manifesto, the idea of having something that we can hold the owners accountable to. And if they want to create something new, and the fan base of United is one of the core parts of what's going to make it such an expensive thing to buy. The fans have to be treated correctly. Do that, work alongside the fans, pay that debt off, pledge to invest X amount. Look, if 1.75 billion is pledged to invest in Chelsea, it should be more than that at Manchester United. Get us back to the top. Get us back here. Not there. That's City's training ground. That's abysmal. What a mistake that was. Get us back here, winning the Premier League, winning the Champions League. That's what we want to see. And that's why these pledges and the concept of these pledges are so important. I'm sure we'll continue to have these conversations. You let me know. Are there any? I've written 6 there. Okay. What else would you have inside that manifesto? You can let me know in the comments below. But whoever the new owner is, from a moral perspective, from the right perspective or the wrong perspective, one thing underlines them all. They have to be the best owners. The best owners to take Manchester United back to the top. You let me know what you think about all that in the comments below. Make sure you subscribe if you're new.